Good evening. Settle in wherever you are, and let the pillow take the weight of your head, because there is nothing here you need to follow closely. You will not be quizzed. If you drift off in the middle of a sentence about the price of coal, that is the point, and I will keep going anyway, quietly, for as long as you need me to. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere specific. Not a vague past, not a soft brown photograph of a past, but one city in 1 year, and one woman's ordinary day inside it, hour by hour, from the dark before the stove is lit to the dark after the lamp is turned down. That city is Chicago. That year is 1893, and I suspect you already have a picture of it. Most people do. Chicago in 1893 means the world's Columbian Exposition. It means the White City rising out of the marsh at Jackson Park, 600 acres of plaster and staff painted the color of bleached bone, domes and colonnades, and lagoons laid out along axes so grand that visitors wrote home saying they had walked through a dream and come out the other side changed. It means the first Ferris wheel, 264 feet of revolving iron, 36 cars, each one large enough to hold 60 people, turning slowly above the midway, while a band played somewhere below. It means electric light. Thousands upon thousands of incandescent bulbs switched on at dusk, outlining every cornice and every arch, reflected in still water, so bright that people who had never seen more than a gas jet in their lives stood at the edge of the Grand Basin and simply wept. 27 million admissions over 6 months. A nation's idea of its own future, built at enormous expense, and then taken down again. That is the postcard. And the postcard is true. Every detail of it happened exactly as described, 4 miles southeast of where we are going. But here is what the postcard leaves out. On the morning that the fair opened, the great majority of the people living in that city did not go. They could not. Admission was 50 cents, and 50 cents was not a small coin in a household where a man's whole week of skilled labor came to around $12, and a great many men earned considerably less than that. 50 cents was 1/4 of a ton of coal delivered. It was 2 dozen eggs and a pound of butter with change left over. It was the difference, in some weeks, between paying the grocer what you owed him and asking him again to carry you until Saturday. So there is another Chicago in that same spring, sitting a few miles inland from all that white plaster, and it is a great deal larger. It is built of wood, frame cottages set close on narrow lots, board sidewalks raised above mud, alleys, sheds, back houses, privies, laundry lines strung between them. It smells of coal smoke and of the river, and when the wind turns out of the southwest, it smells of the stockyards, and everyone in that neighborhood can tell you which way the wind is blowing without going outside. It is loud. Horse car bells, wagon wheels on plank and on stone, the low, continuous grinding of a city that had roughly 1 million people in it in 1890, and would have more than 1.5 million by 1900. Most of them arrived from somewhere else, most of them speaking something other than English at their own kitchen tables. That is where we are going tonight. Not to the fair. 4 miles west of it, to a house you could walk past without noticing, and to a day in it that nobody wrote down, because nobody thought it was worth writing down. Now, before we go, one small thing, and then I will leave you alone. If you find this useful, if this is the voice you have been putting on to get to sleep, it does help me to know you are out there. Subscribing takes a moment and costs nothing. And I'm always curious about the comments on these, so if you are awake enough, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. It is one of the strange pleasures of doing this. Somebody reading that at 2 in the morning in a flat in Manchester. Somebody else at 9 in the evening in Ohio. Somebody on a night shift in Auckland who has this playing on one earbud. It makes the whole thing feel less like broadcasting into nothing. That is all. Now let the room go soft, and let us go back. It is the first week of May, 1893, and the air over Chicago is doing what it does in that season, which is refusing to settle. Winter has not entirely left. The wind comes off the lake in the morning, with an edge in it, and then by afternoon it swings around and comes over the prairie, warm and dusty, and people carry coats they do not need. In the last week, the papers have been full of the fair, which opened on the 1st of the month, with the president himself pressing an ivory and gold key that started the engines in Machinery Hall. There are also, in the same papers, quieter items about banks. Something is wrong with money that spring, though nobody says so plainly yet. By summer, they will say it plainly. Banks will close. Railroads will go into receivership. By the end of the year, men who are working steadily this morning will be standing in lines. But nobody in this house knows that yet, and I am not going to burden you with it before breakfast. Over the whole city, there is coal smoke. This is not an atmospheric detail. It is a physical condition. Every household burns coal for cooking and for heat. Every factory burns it. Every locomotive burns it. And there are a great many locomotives, because this is the greatest rail center in the world, and something like 20 lines run into it. The smoke settles into a haze that yellows the light, and it comes down as soot on windowsills, on collars, on wet sheets hung out to dry in a yard. Women in this city plan their laundry around the wind the way farmers plan around rain. Below the smoke, the river. The Chicago River in 1893 is not a river, in any sense you would find restful. It is a working channel, crowded with lumber schooners and grain barges and tugs, crossed by swing bridges that open constantly and stop traffic in both directions while everyone waits. It carries away, without much ceremony, the waste of the packing houses and the tanneries and the distilleries, and a good deal of what the households produce as well. And it flows, in that year, into Lake Michigan, which is also where the city takes its drinking water. We will come back to that, because it matters enormously to the woman whose day this is, and because it is one of those facts that reorganizes everything you thought you understood about ordinary housekeeping. Now come west, away from the lake, past the downtown with its new tall buildings, the ones with steel frames inside them that let the architects go up 10 and 12 and 16 stories, which is a thing so new that visitors stand in the street with their heads back looking at them. Cross the river. Keep going, past the wholesale houses and the freight yards, into the streets west of Halstead. Here the buildings come down to 2 stories. Frame cottages mostly, wooden, painted once, and not recently, set with their narrow ends to the street, on lots 25 feet wide. Between and behind them, more buildings, because on a lot that size in this decade, you will very often find a cottage in front and a second dwelling behind it in the yard. And both of them full, wooden sidewalks, raised a step or two above the roadway, which is unpaved on many blocks and becomes, in a wet spring, exactly what you are imagining. Board fences, a yard with a hydrant in it, one tap, cold shared, a shed, a line. There is a house on one of these streets, and I would like you to stop in front of it. It is dark. It is not yet 5 in the morning. There is no light in any window on the block except one, 2 doors down, where somebody who works earlier than most is already up. The wooden sidewalk is damp. Somewhere off to the north, a horse car bell sounds, faint, and beyond that, further out and lower, a train. Inside this house, there are 5 people and 1 lodger asleep in 4 rooms, and in about 90 seconds, one of them is going to open her eyes in the dark, before any alarm, out of pure habit, and swing her feet down onto a cold board floor, and begin a day of continuous labor that will not properly end until nearly 11 tonight. That woman is you. You are 29 years old. You are going to spend today doing work that no wage will ever be paid for, that no census taker will record as an occupation, and that the entire household, the rent, the food, the clothing, the health of 3 children, the ability of one man to leave the house at 6 and do a skilled job well, rests upon completely. And you are extremely good at it, in ways that would be recognized instantly as management in any other setting. Nobody is going to tell you that today. Nobody will tell you that for the rest of your life. But I am going to walk you through it, hour by hour, and by the end of tonight, you will know exactly what it took. So let the day begin the way it actually began. Not with light, with cold, and with the particular clarity of a mind that has been keeping a running arithmetic even in sleep, and that wakes already knowing what is in the coal bucket, what is owed at the corner grocery, and what has to be finished before the sun is properly up. Open your eyes. The room is dark, and the air in it is cold enough that you can feel the difference between the part of your face that was under the quilt and the part that was not. You lie still for a moment, only a moment, and take stock of the house by sound. Nothing from the front room, nothing from the back. The stove has gone out, which you already knew, because you can smell it. A dead stove has a smell distinct from a banked one, flatter and more mineral, and you have learned to read it without thinking. It is the 16th of May, 1893. The place is Chicago, on the west side, a little more than half a mile west of Halsted Street, on a block of frame cottages set close together on narrow lots with a wooden sidewalk running past their doors. Your house is 1 story and a half, 4 rooms, front room, a kitchen behind it that is also the main room in every way that matters, and 2 bedrooms, one of which is not really a bedroom, but the back room off the kitchen, rented out. The cottage is wood, painted at some point in the past, a color that has since become the color of weather. It sits raised on posts above the ground, because this part of the city was low and wet within living memory, and everybody who built here learned to keep the floor up off the mud. Underneath the house, there is a crawl space where a cat lives that belongs to nobody. The lot is 25 feet wide. The house takes up most of that width and leaves a passage along one side barely broad enough to walk down carrying a pail, without scraping your knuckles on the boards. Behind the house is the yard, and the yard is where the real geography of your life is. There is a shed. There is a line strung between two poles. There is a privy shared with the family in the cottage behind yours, which stands on the rear of the same lot, because the lot holds two houses, which is normal here, and would have shocked a visitor from a town of any smaller size. And there is a tap, one cold water tap on a standpipe, serving your house, the house behind, and the house next door on the other side of the fence. 3 families. 1 tap. No hot water anywhere on the property that has not first been carried in a pail and set on a fire. You are 29 years old. You were born in this country, which puts you in a minority on this block. Your mother was not. You married at 21. Your husband is a compositor. That means he sets type by hand at a job printing house on the near west side, roughly 2 miles from this door. And it means he is a skilled man in a skilled trade with a union behind him. And it means the household you are lying in this morning is not a poor household. Understand that clearly, because it changes everything about how you should picture the next 20 hours. You are not destitute. You are not in a tenement. You are not doing piecework by lamplight to keep the children fed. You are, by the standards of your own street, doing rather well. A compositor in Chicago in this year can expect somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 to $21 for a full week. And your husband is steady, and he gets close to full weeks most of the year. That is the ceiling of your life. Roughly $19 on a Saturday, handed over in cash, and out of that you must produce everything. You have 3 living children. The oldest is a girl of 9 who goes to the public school 4 blocks east. The middle is a boy of 6. The youngest is a girl not yet 2, who still wakes in the night and who is asleep now in the bed beside you, with 1 foot pressed against your hip, which is one of several reasons you are awake. And in the back room, off the kitchen, there is a lodger, a young man who works in the same trade as your husband, but at a lower grade and a lower wage, and who pays $4 a week for the room, his breakfast and his supper. He's quiet. He is clean. You chose him carefully, and choosing him carefully was a business decision, though nobody in this house would use that word. Rent on this cottage is $11 a month, paid to a collector who comes to the door and writes in a book. Wages arrive Saturday evening. Rent leaves on the 1st. Everything else in the household economy has to be fitted into the space between those 2 facts, and you are the only person who holds the entire shape of it in your head. Now, before you swing your feet down, take 1 breath and know what the air outside this house is like, because the air is not incidental here. It is a condition of daily life the way weather is. When the wind comes from the southwest, which it does often enough that you have stopped remarking on it, it comes over the stockyards, 4 miles from here, where several million animals a year pass through the largest concentration of meat packing on Earth. That smell is not describable in polite terms, and you have long since stopped noticing it, except on the days when it is very bad, at which point you close the windows, which does almost nothing. The rest of the time, the air smells of coal. Every stove in this city burns soft coal. Every locomotive, every factory boiler, every furnace in every downtown building, The result is a permanent grey haze over the whole city, and a fine black grit that settles on every horizontal surface, indoors and out all day, every day. It falls on your washing, it comes in under the door, it sits on the windowsill in a film you can write your name in by evening, if you wiped it clean at noon. And underneath both of those, there is the river, half a mile north of here, into which the city empties nearly everything it produces, and which in warm weather announces itself without assistance. That is the air. Coal, stockyards, river. You have lived in it since you were a girl, and you do not think about it any more than a person by the sea thinks about salt. The sounds are more distinct. 2 blocks over, on the through street, a horse car bell will start up shortly after 5 and continue at intervals all day. From the same direction, iron tires on granite block paving, which is a specific rattling clatter, unlike anything a later century will produce. Further off, freight yards. There are more miles of railroad track converging on this city than on any other city in the world. And at night, when everything else drops away, you can hear couplings banging together somewhere out in the dark for minutes at a stretch. Closer than any of that is the wooden sidewalk. Every person who walks past your house announces themselves through the boards. You know the tread of the milkman, of the man who lives behind you, of your own husband. When the boards creak at an unfamiliar rhythm, you look up. Everyone on this street does. And beyond all of it, out to the southeast on the lakefront, 6 or 7 miles from your front step, there is at this moment the largest thing this city or this country has ever built, which opened to the public 2 weeks ago, and which the newspapers have been calling the White City. 200 acres of white buildings and lagoons and electric light. 27 million admissions will pass through those gates before it closes in the autumn. The whole world is coming to Chicago this summer. Admission is 50 cents. Children under 12, half. You will come back to that arithmetic later today, and so will your 9-year-old repeatedly. So, that is the house, the block, the air, the city, and the year. Now, the day. Today is Tuesday, and Tuesday in this house is wash day, which is not a chore but an occupation, and which will consume the entire span from roughly 7 in the morning until the middle of the afternoon, and leave your hands raw, and your back set in a particular ache that you will feel again tomorrow when you iron. Before the wash can begin, there must be fire and water and breakfast for a man leaving at 10 minutes before 6, and a dinner pail packed for that man, and a separate breakfast for the lodger who leaves later, and 3 children got up and fed, and one of them dressed and sent to school. After the wash, there is the market, because there is nothing in this house for supper, and you buy in small quantities, because you have no way to keep anything cold beyond the ice box, which needs ice, which is another expense and another decision. And this afternoon, at some point, the rent collector. That is the day. Fire, water, wash, market, rent, supper, and the ordinary continuous management of 3 children and 1 house through all of it, without stopping, without sitting for longer than the time it takes to eat, and without any part of it appearing anywhere as work. The census taker who came through this ward will have written your husband's trade in 1 column, and left the corresponding column against your name blank, or filled it with a phrase meaning nothing in particular. You keep a household of 6 people, negotiate credit, manage a budget of roughly $19 a week, purchase and prepare between 40 and 50 meals in that week, produce and maintain the clothing of 5 people, and run a small lodging business on the side. No document in the city of Chicago records any of it. The window over the bed has gone from black to a very slightly less complete black. There is no light in it yet, only the suggestion that light is a thing that will eventually happen. Somewhere below the floorboards, the cat that belongs to nobody moves. You put one hand out from under the quilt into the cold, and then the other, and you sit up carefully so as not to wake the child sleeping against your hip. The floor, when you reach it, is exactly as cold as you knew it would be. The stove is in the front room, which is also the kitchen, which is also where the 2 younger children sleep on a mattress that is rolled and set against the wall by 7 each morning. You cross to it in the dark by memory, avoiding the loose board near the table leg, and you crouch in front of the firebox and open the door, and the smell that comes out is the smell of last night gone cold, ash and old iron, and a faint sweetness from whatever fat spat onto the plate. Nothing in this house happens before this. That is worth saying plainly, because it is easy, looking back, to picture a morning beginning with a woman putting a kettle on, as though a kettle were a thing that simply goes on. There is no water in the kettle. There is no heat under the kettle. There is no light to see the kettle by. Before the first cup of coffee exists, before the children can be washed, before the dinner pail can be filled, you must build a fire from nothing, and you must do it well enough on the first attempt that the whole schedule of the next 14 hours holds together, because a fire that will not catch costs you 20 minutes you do not have, and 20 minutes lost at 4:30 is 20 minutes lost from every hour after it. You rake the grate. The ash falls through into the pan below, and you pull the pan out and set it aside, because the ash is not waste. Ash goes on the icy patch by the yard gate in winter, and ash scours a pot when the scouring soap has run out, and ash goes into the privy vault, and ash, sifted, sometimes surrenders a few small clinkers of coal that did not fully burn and will burn now. You sift it with your fingers in the dark, and you do not think of this as thrift. You think of it as the ordinary handling of a material that has more than one use. Then kindling. Shavings from the crate the grocer let you have, split fine the evening before with a hatchet on the back step, because splitting kindling at 4:30 wakes the whole house and wakes the lodger, and the lodger pays $4 a week, partly on the understanding that he is not woken. Then a twist of newspaper, then the match, and the small yellow flare of it, and for a moment you can see your own hands, red at the knuckles, and the black iron mouth of the firebox. And then the paper catches and the shavings catch, and you feed in 3 small pieces of coal, one at a time, watching each one take. Here is a number that explains a great deal about the way this household lives. A ton of good bituminous coal, delivered to a yard on the west side in this decade, ran somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $5, depending on the season, the grade, and how honest the dealer was about the weight. $5 for 2,000 pounds. That is 1/4 cent a pound, which is as cheap as heat has ever been in the history of the world up to this moment. And you do not pay it. You do not pay it because you cannot produce $5 at one time in the month of February, and because there is nowhere to put a ton of coal. A ton of coal requires a shed, or a bin, or a cellar with an outside chute, and you have a shed the size of a wardrobe that already holds the wash tub, the boiler, the hatchet, and a barrel. So you buy coal the way the poor have always bought everything, which is in small quantities, frequently, at a rate that would be considered outrageous if anyone with money had to pay it. The coal man on the corner sells by the bushel and by the bucket. A bucket of coal carried home by a child might cost you 10 or 15 cents. Reckon that out against the ton, and you find that you are paying something on the order of 2, 3, sometimes 4 times the rate per pound that a household with a cellar and $5 pays for the identical black rock out of the identical Illinois seam. The colder the week, the more buckets, and the more buckets, the wider the gap. Poverty is expensive, not in a poetic sense, in the sense that the same fuel, burned in the same stove, costs you more money because you are poor, and costs you more money precisely in the weeks when you have least. Every family on this street understands this arithmetic in their bones, and none of them can escape it, because escaping it requires the one thing none of them has, which is the ability to lay out a large sum at a favorable moment and store the result. That is nearly the whole difference between comfort and hardship in this city, and it has very little to do with how carefully anyone manages. So you feed the fire 3 pieces at a time, and you do not overfill the box, and you close the damper down to a setting you found by trial 4 winters ago, and have never had to think about since. The kettle now. You filled it last night from the pail, because a kettle filled the night before is a kettle. You do not have to go out to the yard for at 4:30 in the dark in your shawl, and there are perhaps 200 small arrangements of this kind holding your day together, each one invisible, each one the product of somebody having thought about it once and then never again. Coffee first, because your husband must have it, and because you must. The coffee is roasted whole, and you grind it in the mill, held between your knees, and you use rather less than the tin's instructions suggest, and you will use the grounds a second time at noon for yourself, which is a different and thinner drink, but is hot and is brown, and answers to the name. Breakfast is bread, fried in the grease saved from Sunday, and coffee, and if there are eggs, an egg for him. There is no ceremony about it. He eats standing half the time, 1 boot on, and this is not coldness between you, but the ordinary shape of a morning in which a man must be at the composing room by 6, and the walk is 25 minutes, and the horse-car fare is 5 cents each way, which is 60 cents a week, which is a pair of children's shoes over a season. So he walks. While he eats, you are packing the dinner pail, and the dinner pail is a small daily examination that you sit for every morning of your married life. It is tin, 2 tiers, with a lid that clamps. In the bottom goes the substantial thing. Cold meat, if there was meat, or bread and dripping, or a boiled potato and an onion, or cheese if cheese was cheap that week. In the top goes whatever can be called a pleasure, without costing anything. A piece of pie if you baked, an apple in the autumn, a screw of paper with sugar in it for his tea. Men compare dinner pails. They open them side by side on a bench in a printing house at noon, and they see what is in each other's and what is in yours is read by 10 men as a statement about your household and about you. So the pail is never careless. It is never merely adequate. On the worst weeks, it is arranged so that the thinness is not obvious, the bread cut thicker, the small good thing on top where it shows. That is not vanity. That is a woman managing her husband's standing among his fellows with the materials available to her, which are bread, dripping, and presentation. He puts on his coat. He takes the pail by the handle. There is some exchange about the rent collector, and about whether the boy's shoes will last, and about the fare, which everyone in this city is talking about in this month of this year, and which you have not yet decided whether you can afford to see. He says something about Saturday. You say something about Saturday. The whole conversation takes 40 seconds, and both of you have had it, in some version, 500 times. Then the door, and the cold coming in with the opening of it, and the sound of his boots on the wooden sidewalk going away east, joining the other boots. Because at this hour, every door on this street is releasing a man onto that sidewalk, and the sound of them together is one of the 2 or 3 sounds by which you could identify the time of day with your eyes shut. The door closes. The house is yours. It is not quiet. There is the stove ticking as the iron expands. There is a child turning over. There is somewhere in the walls the small industry of creatures you have made your peace with. Outside, a horse car bell, and further off, the low sustained noise of the city getting up, which is a sound made of 10,000 separate things, and arrives as one thing. 3 children asleep, 1 lodger asleep, 1 stove burning properly, 1 kettle at the boil, and roughly 15 hours of daylight coming toward you with a washing in it. You stand for a moment with your hands flat on the table. This is the only part of the day that belongs to nobody but you, and it lasts about 90 seconds, and you spend it exactly as you always spend it, which is by looking at the ceiling and going through the order of the day one more time to be sure that nothing in it collides with anything else. Water before fire is hot. Whites before colours. Grocer before noon, or the good bread is gone. Rent money out of the tin and into your apron pocket before the collector. Never after. Never counted in front of him. Satisfied? You pour the water. You pour the water, and then you go out to get more of it, because the pail you have just emptied was the last of what you carried in last night. And today is a washing day. And a washing day is measured not in hours, but in trips to the yard. The tap stands on a short iron pipe near the fence, and it serves your cottage and the 2 behind it, which is to say 3 households and something like 19 people, and it has a way of running thin in the morning when everyone wants it at once. You have learned to go early. At 5:30, the woman from the rear cottage is not up yet, and the one from the middle has a husband who leaves at 4 and a habit of drawing her water the night before. So the tap is yours, and the water comes cold enough to make your knuckles ache within half a minute of holding the handle. A full pail is a little over 2 gallons. 2 gallons of water weighs about 17 pounds, and the pail itself adds 2 more, and you carry 1 in each hand, because carrying 1 is not half the work. It is nearly all of it, since a single weight on one side drags your shoulder down and makes you walk crooked over uneven boards in the dark. 2 balances you. 19 pounds in the left, 19 in the right, 22 steps from the tap to the back door, and then the step up, which is the part that spills if you are careless. For an ordinary day, you carry perhaps 8 pails. Drinking, cooking, washing hands and faces, the dishes twice, the floor once, and the pot on the stove that must never be allowed to go empty. On a washing day, you carry between 25 and 40, depending on how dirty the week has been, and whether you are doing the bedding. And today you are doing the bedding. Call it 35 trips. Call it something over 600 pounds of water, lifted, carried, and lifted again, before you have washed a single thing. Nobody has ever written that number down anywhere. It does not appear in a wage book. It is not in the census, which will record your husband's trade and give you the word housekeeping, which is one word standing in for 600 pounds of water and everything that follows it. Here is something worth slowing down for, because it explains why you boil what you boil. The water in that pail came from Lake Michigan. It came through a tunnel from a crib set 2 miles out from shore, a round timber and iron thing sitting on the lake like an anchored island. And the reason the crib is 2 miles out is that the water nearer shore is not fit to drink, and the reason it is not fit to drink is the river. The Chicago River, at this moment in the spring of 1893, still runs the wrong way. It runs east, into the lake. It carries with it what the packing houses put in it, and what the tanneries and the distilleries and the glue works put in it, and what 1 million people put in it, and it carries all of that out toward the intake cribs. And when the wind comes hard from the west, or the rain comes hard from anywhere, the plume of the river reaches the crib, and the crib pumps it back to the city and out of your tap. Everyone on this street knows this. Not in those words, and not with the engineering of it, but they know that some days the water tastes of something, and on those days you do not give it to a child straight. The remedy is the kettle, boiling for a good few minutes at a rolling boil, and then it must cool. And cooled boiled water tastes flat and slightly of iron, and children complain about it, and you make them drink it anyway. There is a plan for this. There has been a plan for years. The city is going to dig a channel west and south, and make the river run backwards, away from the lake and toward the Mississippi, which is the largest single piece of engineering anyone in this country has yet proposed. And the digging of it will start next year and finish in 1900. You will be 36 by then. Until it is finished, the arrangement is that the kettle does the work that the canal is not yet doing, and the kettle is on your stove, and the fuel for it is bought by the bucket, and the carrying of the water for it is yours. You set the big pot on, and the copper boiler beside it, and you fill both. And now the stove is doing all it can do, and you go to wake the children. The 2 younger ones sleep in the front room on a bed that is folded up and put against the wall by 7 every morning, because that room has to be a room again by then. The oldest, the girl, is 9 and sleeps in the back with you, on a cot that also has to disappear. You wake the girl first, always, because she is the one who helps. And there is a difference between being woken into work and being woken into nothing, and she has learned it. She dresses herself. Wool stockings, a dress that was hers last year, and has been let down twice at the hem, an apron over it, and shoes that are her second best pair, because the good ones are for church and for the last week of school, when there are visitors. Her hair takes 4 minutes, and she stands very still for it, looking at the wall, half asleep, while you plait it. And this is a small, daily intimacy that neither of you would ever call by that name. The boy is 6, and does not dress himself so much as get dressed by you, while resisting mildly. The baby is not a baby exactly, being nearly 3, but is still called that, and will be until something happens to change it. She wakes hungry and vocal, and there is no arranging her. Bread, and what is left of yesterday's milk. And for the girl, a boiled egg, because school is a long morning. Then the girl goes, at 10 minutes to 8, with a shawl over her head, because the mornings are still cold, out into the street, where the other children are already flowing east toward the schoolhouse, in a loose, noisy tide, and you watch her join it from the door, and then stop watching, because there is a boiler coming up to heat behind you. The lodger eats separately, and later, and at the corner of the table. His name you use, but he is spoken of within the household as the lodger, and his position is precise and understood. He pays $4 a week. For that he has the back room, which is small and has its own door onto the yard passage. And he has breakfast and supper, and he has his washing done with the household washing. And his boots are not his own affair on Sundays, because you black them along with your husband's. $4 a week is what a room and 2 meals and a laundry service cost in this neighborhood in this year. And it is not a favor, and it is not charity. It is a business, and it is a business you run. Consider what $4 is. Your husband, a compositor, a skilled man in a good trade with a union card, brings home something between $18 and $21 a week when the shop is busy, and less when it is not. And there are weeks in January and February when it is a great deal less. The lodger's $4 is therefore about 1/5 of the household's income in a good week, and closer to a quarter in a poor one. And it is the portion of the income that does not vary. It arrives on Monday, in coin, on the corner of that same table. Print shops slow down. Lodgers do not. Out of the $4, his food costs you perhaps $1.40. His share of the coal, call it 20 cents. His washing, in soap and in the water you have already carried, call it 15. What is left, something near $2, is the rent money, or most of it. And this is the arithmetic that makes the difference between a household that pays rent out of wages and a household that pays rent out of a room. So he gets his egg. He gets coffee that is not the second boiling. His bread is cut thicker than the children's, and if there is bacon in the house on a Wednesday, it goes onto his plate rather than yours. And neither he nor your husband nor anyone else has ever noticed this, or ever will, because it is invisible by design. And it is invisible by design because you designed it. He eats in about 9 minutes, says something about the weather, and is gone by 8:20. And he is a decent man, in the sense that matters most in a lodging house, which is that he is quiet and predictable, and does not bring anyone home. Now the house empties out to its working shape, 2 small children, one of whom can be trusted for stretches of about 4 minutes, and one of whom cannot be trusted at all. A stove at full heat with a copper boiler on it, and a pot beside it. A kettle, steam beginning to sit on the inside of the window glass and run down it in lines. You go out through the back door to the shed, where the tub hangs on a nail, and you take it down, and it is galvanized iron, and it is the single largest object you will move today. You bring it in sideways through the door, which is a maneuver with a trick to it that you learned the hard way in your first year of marriage, and you set it in the middle of the floor, which is now no longer a floor, but a place where a tub is. The washboard leans against the wall. The bar of soap sits in its dish, already cut down into working pieces. The bluing, the wooden dolly, the ringing bucket, the line of sorted heaps rising along the wall in the order they will go in the water. Whites and near whites and colours, and last of all, the things from the yard. Behind you, the boiler begins to knock softly against itself, which is the sound water makes just before it goes. You push your sleeves up past the elbow. The whites go in first, because the water is cleanest at the start and will only get worse. And every part of the order you work in today is decided by that one fact. Sheets, shirts, the collars and cuffs that come off your husband's shirt separately, the children's underthings, a tablecloth that has been waiting since Sunday. They have been soaking since last night in a tub of cold water with a handful of soda in it, because dirt that has been loosened overnight comes out with perhaps half the rubbing of dirt that has not, and rubbing is the part that costs you. You lift them out, dripping, and wring them by hand, twisting each piece into a rope and turning until the water runs thin. And then they go into the boiler on the stove with soap shaved into the water. Boiling laundry is not something people do now, and it is worth saying plainly what it accomplished. Hot water dissolves grease. Soap breaks it loose. Sustained boiling, 20 minutes or half an hour at a rolling heat, does what no amount of scrubbing at lukewarm temperature will do, which is to lift the fat and the body oils out of the fiber entirely, rather than smearing them around inside it. It is also the only reliable way anyone in this city has of killing what may be living in a piece of cloth. There is no other sterilizing step in the household week. This is it, which is why the whites boil and the colored things do not, and why the whites last and stay white, and the colored things fade to something softer and vaguer with every season. You stand over the boiler with a wooden stick worn pale and smooth at one end, and you lift and turn the mass of cloth in the water, and steam comes up into your face. And this is April, but the room is now something closer to August. Then the washboard. The board is wood-framed with a corrugated zinc face, and it stands in the tub at an angle against your thighs, and the piece of cloth goes over it wet, and you soap it and push it up the ridges and drag it down and do it again. Collars and cuffs and the underarms of shirts and the knees of small trousers get the most of this. You do it with the heel of your hand and with your knuckles. You do it for the better part of 2 hours across the course of the morning, in stretches between the other things. Your hands will be red at noon, and by evening the skin between your first and second fingers will be split in 2 places, which happens most weeks and heals most weeks, and has stopped being a thing you comment on. The soap is worth pausing over, because it tells you where a household sits. A bar of common laundry soap in Chicago in this decade runs to about 4 or 5 cents, and you buy it by the bar and cut it and dry the pieces on a shelf, because soap that has hardened lasts longer in water than soap fresh from the grocer. Your mother made soap. You have made soap in a bad winter, from saved grease and lye, and you know exactly how it goes, and exactly how much of your day it takes, and exactly how uncertain the result is, and you buy it now instead. And that shift from making to buying is one of the quiet ways this decade differs from the one your mother kept house in. A woman a generation back made her own soap, and her own candles, and often her own bread, and sometimes her own cloth. You buy soap, you buy kerosene, you buy bread perhaps twice a week from the bakery on the corner, and you still work from before 5 in the morning until after 9 at night, because the labor did not go away. It moved. What you buy now, you pay for with your husband's wage, and what you pay for with a wage has to be earned back somewhere. And so the arithmetic of the household tightened even as the tasks got fewer. Starch is the other half of it. You make it yourself, a paste of laundry starch boiled thin and then let down with water, and everything that shows to the public goes through it. Collars, cuffs, shirt fronts, aprons, the children's pinafores, curtains twice a year. Starch is not about tidiness. Starch is about dirt not reaching the cloth. A starched collar holds the grime in a stiff surface layer that comes out again in the next wash, and an unstarched collar takes the grime into the weave and keeps it. A man in a starched white collar is a man whose wife has spent time on him. Everyone on the street knows how to read that, and reads it, and forms opinions accordingly. And the bluing, a small bottle of blue, a few drops in the last rinse, because white cloth yellows with age and washing, and a trace of blue in it cancels the yellow to the eye, and reads as whiter than white. It does not clean anything. It is a trick of vision, sold in bottles, and every woman on your street buys it, because appearance is not a vanity here. It is a credential. By 9:30, the neighbor woman is out in her yard with her own tubs, because Monday is Monday on every side of the fence, and the two of you conduct a conversation across 4 feet of palings that will run in pieces for the next 3 hours. She is Bohemian. She has been here 11 years. Her English is better than she believes it to be, and much better than your Czech, which consists of about 9 words, 4 of which are foods. You talk about a child of hers with a cough. You talk about the price of coffee going up at the corner. You talk about a family 2 doors down who have taken in a second lodger in a room that was tight with one. And you both say the polite thing about it, and then say the true thing about it, which is that they are behind on rent, and everybody knows. This is not idleness, and it is not gossip in the dismissive sense of that word. This conversation is the entire information system of the block. It is how you learn which grocer is watering his milk, which landlord is raising rents, which factory is hiring girls, whose husband has been laid off, who is sick and needs somebody to take a pot of something over. There is no other channel. The newspaper does not carry it. The church carries some of it on Sundays, a week late. This carries it the same morning, over 2 tubs of grey water, in 2 languages neither woman fully commands. And there is one more thing you both know without discussing it, which is that either of you could be doing this for money instead of for your own family. And one of you nearly was. Taking in washing is the work a woman of this city falls back on when there is no other work available to her. It requires no capital beyond a tub and a boiler she already owns. It can be done in her own rooms, with her own children present, which no factory job allows. It requires no English. And so it becomes, in Chicago in the 1890s, the occupation of widows, of wives of men who are ill or out of work or gone, of women new off the boat, and above all of black women in this city, who are shut out of nearly every other kind of paid work here, regardless of what they can do, and who take in laundry, because the doors that are open to them are that door and domestic service, and very little else. The rates are not good. A woman taking in family washing might get somewhere between 50 cents and $1 for a family's week of it, depending on the size of the family and the fineness of what is sent, and she will handle 3 or 4 such families in a week if she can get them. And that puts her at perhaps $2 or $3 for 6 days of the heaviest physical labor performed by anyone in the city not employed in the yards. She carries the water. She buys the coal that heats it. She buys the soap. Those costs come out of the 50 cents. The commercial steam laundries are opening now along the west side, and they will take this work away from her eventually. And they will do it cheaper, and the men who own them will do very well. Around 11, you begin to wring and rinse in earnest, and the wringing is where the arms go. Every piece is twisted by hand twice, once out of the wash water and once out of the rinse, and a wet sheet twisted tight is something you have to brace your body against. There is a mechanical wringer, 2 rubber rollers on a frame that clamps to the tub, and it costs somewhere around $3, and it is on the list. It has been on the list for 2 years, behind other things that kept being more urgent. Then out to the yard, with the basket on your hip, and here is the last calculation of the morning, and it is a Chicago calculation. The lines run from the back of the house to the fence. The wind this morning is out of the west, which is the good direction, because the good direction is anything that is not out of the east and not out of the south. Out of the south comes the yards. Out of the east comes the mills and the river and the soft coal smoke of every stove and boiler and locomotive between here and the lake. And that smoke carries soot, and soot falls, and soot on a wet white sheet does not brush off. So you stand in the yard with a basket of whites on your hip, and you look at the sky, and at the way the smoke is leaning off the chimneys down the block, and you make a judgment, and the judgment is worth real money and 4 hours of your labor. If you are wrong, some of this goes back in the tub tomorrow. Today you hang the whites. You peg them along the good line, and they go up heavy and dripping and dark with water, and they crack once in the wind as they lift. Behind you, in the house, the tub is still full, and the colored things have not been touched. The colored things can wait, and they will wait, because there is a window in the middle of the morning when the grocer is not busy, and the good bread is not yet gone. And if you miss it, you will be standing behind 4 other women, while the youngest tries to eat a wooden crate. So you dry your hands on your apron, and the apron is wet through at the front from the tub, and you take it off and hang it on the nail by the door, and put on the other one, the one that is only for going out. You wipe the youngest's face. You find your basket, the deep one with the broken handle that your husband bound with wire 2 winters ago, and which has outlasted 3 better baskets. You put your purse in the bottom of it, and the purse is a small flat cloth thing with a drawstring, and there is almost nothing in it, and that is fine, because almost nothing is what you were expecting to have. Out the door, down the 2 steps, onto the sidewalk. The sidewalk is wood. Not stone, not brick, wood plank laid on stringers, raised a foot or so above the dirt of the street, and it runs the length of the block, and then stops, and then starts again a little higher or a little lower, depending on which property owner laid which section in which year. Some of the planks are new and pale, some are grey and split, and give under your heel. There is a hole 2 doors down that everyone on this block knows about the way you know about a loose stair in your own house, and you step over it without looking. And so does your child, and so does the woman coming the other way with a coal bucket. Below the sidewalk, the street itself is dirt. It has been graded, and it has been oiled at some point in the past. And after a wet spring, it holds water in long, shallow lakes that the wagons churn into something that is not quite mud and not quite soup. This is not the picture of Chicago that goes out on the postcards. 4 miles east, there are streets paved in granite block and asphalt, and there are electric lamps on iron standards. And here there is wood and dirt, and a wooden pump handle. And both of those are the same city, in the same month, in the same year. You carry the youngest on your hip. She is nearly 3, and she is heavy, and she is at the age where she will walk perfectly well for 100 feet, and then sit down in the road. And you have not got time for the sitting down. So you carry her, and you carry the basket on the other arm. And this is simply how a woman moves down this street, and every second woman you pass is doing the same thing. The corner grocer occupies the ground floor of a 2-story frame building with the family living above it. There is a window with a few things arranged in it that have been arranged in it for some weeks. Inside it is dim, and it smells like everything at once: coffee and kerosene, and vinegar, and smoked fish, and the particular dusty sweetness of a barrel of sugar that has been open a while. The grocer knows you. This is not sentiment. It is the entire business model. He knows your name. He knows your husband's trade. He knows that the wage comes on Saturday, and he knows to the cent what you already owe him. The book comes out from under the counter. It is a narrow ledger with a marbled cover, and there is a page in it with your name at the top. And on that page is a column of small entries in pencil, and the sum at the bottom of the column is the truest single number in your life. You buy on that book from Sunday to Saturday. On Saturday evening, after your husband has been paid, you come back down this sidewalk with actual money, and you settle it, or you settle most of it, and the column is ruled off and a new one begins. Slow down here, because that ledger is doing something enormous, and it is easy to walk past. Credit at the corner store is what stands between a wage-earning household and disaster in a week, when the wage does not arrive. If your husband is laid off on a Tuesday, the family still eats on Wednesday, because the grocer's book absorbs it. That is the good half. The other half is that the price of that absorption is built into everything on his shelves. He is not a charity. He is a small businessman carrying dozens of families at once on nothing but his own judgment of who pays, and he covers the risk the way anyone covers risk, which is by charging more. You pay perhaps a cent or two more on nearly everything you buy than the woman 4 miles east who walks into a cash store with a full purse. That is the shape of it. The less money you have, the more each thing costs you. It is true of coal by the bucket. It is true of a room by the week. And it is true of a pound of coffee bought on a book. So what does the book actually record? Your husband is a compositor, and he is a skilled tradesman, and a skilled union man in the printing trade in this city in this decade, earns something in the range of $18 to $20 in a good full week. Call it 18. That is a genuinely respectable wage. There are men on this block earning $9 and $10 for longer hours, and out of that $18, roughly $2 go to rent, and something over $1 goes to fuel, and the rest of it is mostly food, and the food is mostly what is written in that pencil column. Here are the numbers you carry in your head without ever writing them down. A pound of butter, good creamery butter, runs somewhere around 25 cents, and dairy butter of the less reliable sort, perhaps 18 or 20. And you buy the cheaper kind, and you buy it in half pounds. Eggs run around 15 to 18 cents a dozen in spring, which is the cheap season, and will be double that by December. And you know that, and every woman in this store knows that. And the whole rhythm of a household year turns on that fact. Coffee, roasted, around 30 cents a pound, and you make it stretch by boiling the grounds a second time. Sugar around 6 cents a pound of round steak, 12 or 13 cents. A pound of pork chops, 10. A pound of the boiling beef that you actually buy, the shin and the neck and the flank, 6 or 7, and you buy that, and you make it feed 5 people twice. Potatoes by the peck, flour by the sack, when you can manage the outlay, because the sack is cheaper by the pound, and the outlay is the problem. A loaf of bread, 5 cents, and you bake most of your own precisely to avoid that 5 cents. And the arithmetic of whether to bake or buy is one you rerun every few days against the price of coal and the state of your back. Set that against $18. It works. It works with nothing to spare, and it works only while every week is a full week, and it is a plain fact of this trade and this city that not every week is a full week. You buy a half pound of butter and a pound of the boiling beef, and a peck of potatoes and coffee, and a 5-cent tin of blacking, and the grocer writes each one in the column in pencil, and you watch him write, because you are checking, and he knows you are checking, and there is no offense in it on either side. Outside again, and the street has filled up. Mid-morning is when the wagons come. There is a man with a flat wagon and 2 tired horses selling greens and early radishes and last year's onions, and he stops at the corner and shouts one long word that is not quite any word, and women come out onto the sidewalks with bowls. You go down to him, and you argue, mildly, and as a matter of ritual, about the onions. There is a fish man on Fridays. There is a scissors grinder who comes irregularly and sets his wheel spinning with a foot treadle and throws sparks that the children stand too close to. There is a rag and bone man with a bell, and there is the ice wagon, and the ice wagon matters. It comes with the great blocks under a canvas and sawdust, and the driver saws off what you ask for with a handsaw and lifts it with tongs and drops it into your pan. And you buy it by the piece, 10 or 15 pounds at a time, a few cents worth. You do not have an icebox as such. You have a wooden chest lined with zinc that your husband made, and it is not very good, and in July the ice in it is gone by evening. But in a city where milk turns in half a day and meat turns faster, the difference between having ice and not having ice is the difference between buying food for today and buying food for the week. The children follow the ice wagon down the block for the chips, the way children have followed it every summer since there have been ice wagons, and the driver lets them. And that is a small kindness repeated 10,000 times a day across this city and written down nowhere. Stand still on this corner for 1 minute and listen. The peddler is shouting in Bohemian. The two women at the pump are speaking German, and one of them switches to English halfway through a sentence and then back again. The grocer speaks German and enough English and enough of a few other things to sell to anybody. Up the block there are Polish families, and further west there are more, and there are Irish households scattered through all of it, who have been here a generation longer and consider themselves, quietly, the original inhabitants. You live in a neighborhood where the language of the street is not one language. Your children will speak English better than the adults around them, and they will be the translators, at the doctor's, at the landlord's, at the school. That is the arrangement in half the houses on this block, and it is why a woman of 30 here can go weeks without needing much English at all, and why her daughter cannot imagine such a thing. You shift the child on your hip. The basket is heavier now, and behind you, in the house, the tub is still full. The walk back takes longer than the walk out, because the basket is full, and the child is heavier than she was an hour ago, and because two women stop you between the corner and your own gate, and neither conversation can be cut short without cost. By the time you push the door open with your hip, the fire has sunk to almost nothing, and the wash water in the tub has gone the temperature of a room, which is the worst temperature it can be. There is a rule in a house like this, learned early and never written down anywhere. The fire is the first thing and the last thing. Everything else in the day arranges itself around what the stove is doing. You set the basket on the table, put the child down on the floor with a wooden spoon, and go straight to the range with the poker. Dinner is at noon, not lunch. Dinner is the middle meal, the substantial one, and supper is what comes in the evening when the men are home. And if you called the noon meal lunch on this street, people would assume you were putting on airs or reading too many ladies' magazines. Your husband is not home for it. He carries his dinner pail to the printing house and eats at the bench or in the alley behind it. So the noon meal is you, the two youngest, and the older one if the school lets out for the hour, which it does. What you make is dictated less by appetite than by what the morning left you, and what the stove will do while you are still doing 4 other things. Today it is a pot of soup that has been going since yesterday, extended with the potatoes and the onion from the basket, and a handful of barley, and bread, and what is left of the butter, and coffee reheated from the morning, because coffee grounds in this house get used twice, and sometimes 3 times before they are surrendered. The bread is not yours. You bake perhaps twice a week in the cool months, and almost never in the warm ones, because heating that oven in June turns 4 rooms into a condition no one can sit in. The bakery on the corner sells a loaf for 5 cents, and the arithmetic is genuinely close. The flour for a loaf costs you around 3 cents, but the coal costs something, and the 2 hours cost something, though nobody but you is counting the 2 hours. In winter, you bake. In summer, you buy. Women of your mother's generation would have found the buying shameful. Women of yours do it, and do not discuss it much. Here is something worth slowing down for, because the object at the center of this room deserves a proper look. The range against the wall is cast iron, about 4 feet wide, standing on short legs, black and dull where it has not been blacked recently, and dully shining where it has. It has a firebox on the left, 6 lids on top of different sizes, an oven on the right, a warming shelf above, and a reservoir on the far end that holds several gallons of water and keeps it hot whenever the fire is going. That reservoir is one of the great quiet blessings of this stove. It is why you have warm water at all, without deliberately making warm water. It has no thermometer. It has no dial, no marked settings, no gauge of any kind. The entire temperature control of this machine consists of 3 things: how much fuel you put in, how you set the dampers, and where on the top surface you put the pot. The lid directly over the firebox is fierce. The lid at the far right end, over the flue run, is gentle enough to hold a pot barely trembling for hours. Between them is a gradient of maybe 5 distinct heats, and you know all 5 by hand, meaning you know them by holding your palm above the iron and counting. That is not a folksy detail. That is a professional skill, acquired over years, and it is why a woman who has run a stove for a decade can produce a meal, and a woman who has not will burn the bottom and leave the middle cold. Baking is the hardest part. To judge an oven, you open the door, put your hand inside, and count seconds until you must pull it out. Fewer seconds means hot enough for bread. More seconds means it will do for a slow pudding. Some cookbooks of the period try to describe this in print, and the descriptions are almost comic in their vagueness, because there is no way to write it down. It transfers from one woman to another by standing beside her. Feeding the fire is constant. A coal range wants attention every 20 minutes or so if you are actually cooking on it. The ash pan fills and must be pulled and carried out and emptied. The flue collects soot and must be cleaned, or the whole stove sulks and smokes. The iron must be blacked with stove polish and a brush to keep it from rusting, which is a filthy job that takes the better part of an hour and gets done every week or 2, and which is the reason your hands look the way they look. And it heats the room, which in January you are grateful for, and in July you are not. There is no summer setting on a coal range. There is only the fire, or no fire, and no food. The older one comes through the door at 12:10, with her coat half off before she is fully inside. School lets out for the dinner hour, and lets back in at 1, and she has covered the 6 blocks each way at a run, because she always does. She is 9. She sits at the table and eats a great deal of soup very fast, and tells you 3 things about the morning, 2 of which you cannot follow, because they concern the private politics of girls you have never met. Her school is a public grammar school, 3 stories of brick built in the last 15 years, with 2 entrances marked for boys and girls, and a yard divided the same way. There are 52 children in her room, and 1 teacher, and that teacher is a young unmarried woman who will lose her position the day she marries, because that is the rule in Chicago, as it is nearly everywhere. The teacher earns somewhere around $600 a year, which is more than your husband earns, and which is one of the very few respectable routes by which a girl from a street like this one can end up earning a salary at all. The day is recitation and drill, reading aloud, spelling aloud, arithmetic worked at the board, penmanship in a slanted copperplate hand that your daughter has already mastered better than you ever did, geography from a wall map, a little history, singing, class of 52, one teacher, and order kept largely by the sheer weight of routine. The children stand to recite and sit when finished. It is not gentle, and it is not cruel. It is a system built to move very large numbers of children through the same content with very little money. Illinois passed a compulsory education law in 1883, requiring 12 weeks of schooling a year for children between 8 and 14, and strengthened it in 1889. And the strengthening set off a genuine political fight, because the new law required that certain subjects be taught in English, and the city was full of parochial schools teaching in German and Bohemian and Polish, and thousands of families understood that as an attack on their churches and their languages. The law was rewritten within a few years under exactly that pressure. This is worth knowing, because it tells you that school, in this city in these years, was never simply school. It was the place where the question of what the children of immigrants would become got argued out, block by block. Attendance in practice is uneven. Enforcement is thin. Plenty of children on this street go irregularly, and more of them stop early. The expectation for a girl of your class is that she finishes the grammar grades, if the family can spare her, which means somewhere around 13 or 14, and then goes to work. High school exists and is free and is genuinely available, and a small number of girls from streets like this go, and a much smaller number finish. The barrier is not the tuition. The barrier is that at 14, a girl can earn $3 or $4 a week in a department store, or a bindery, or a candy factory, and in a household running as close to the line as yours. $3 a week is not an abstraction. You have not decided about your daughter. You turn it over more often than you admit. She reads better than anyone in this house. She could sit for the examinations. That is 4 more years of not earning, and 4 more years of shoes and books and a decent dress, so she is not shamed in front of the girls from Ashland Avenue. And the honest truth is that whether she goes will be decided less by her ability than by whether her father's shop has a slow season and whether anyone in this house gets sick. She's gone again by 5 to 1, out the door with a crust in her hand, and the room drops back to the 2 small ones and you. The dishes go into a basin of water dipped from the reservoir. There are not many. You wash them standing, dry them on a cloth that has been a flour sack, and before that something else, and put them on the shelf, and wipe the oilcloth, and sweep under the table where the youngest has distributed a remarkable amount of bread. The middle of the day has a particular quality in a house like this. The morning's hard labor is behind you, and the evening's has not started. The 2 children are on the floor, and are, for the moment, occupied with each other. The stove has settled to a low, steady thing. Through the window, the light has come around to the west side of the room, and it lies across the boards in a long pale rectangle with the shadow of the sash printed on it and dust moving in it. And you notice it because for about 4 minutes there is nothing you are required to do. Then the light moves, and the tub is still in the middle of the floor, and the water in it has to go somewhere. The tub goes out the back door in stages, because a full one cannot be lifted by anyone, and you tip it in thirds down the yard toward the alley where the ground slopes, and the last of it you carry in the pail and throw across the boards of the walk to lay the dust. Then the tub goes back on its nail in the shed, and the floor gets a wipe where the water sat, and the middle of the day is over. What comes next is the part of the work that looks like rest to anyone watching, and is not. You bring the chair around to the window on the west side, where the light is best from about 1:30 until the sun drops behind the flats on the next street, and you set the basket down beside you, and the basket is never empty. It is never empty in the way the water is never carried, and the stove is never fed. Tonight, it holds a pair of your husband's trousers with the seat worn thin, 2 of the boys' stockings past the point where darning is honest, and into the point where darning is defiance, a sheet that has begun to go in the middle, an apron with a torn string, and a dress of the older girls that she has grown out of at the shoulder, while the hem is still perfectly good. You start with the trousers because they are needed, and because the light is strongest now, and you want the strong light for the close work later. Turning a collar is the small famous trick of a household like yours, and you have done it enough times that your hands know the order without consulting you. The shirt collar wears through first at the fold along the back of the neck, where the razor and the skin and the starch have all worked on the same 1/4 inch of cotton for 2 years. So you pick the collar off, unpick the stitching all the way around, turn the whole band over, so the worn fold is on the underside, where nothing touches it, and set it back on. The shirt gets another year. The seam you make will be your seam, not the factory's, and it will be slightly heavier, and nobody will ever look at the back of your husband's neck closely enough to know. Cuffs get the same treatment. Sheets get turned end to end, and then, when the middle finally goes past saving, cut down the worn line and sewn together at what were the 2 selvage edges, so the strong sides are now in the middle and the thin ones at the outside. It is called turning a sheet sides to middle, and it is done in nearly every house on this street, and in a great many houses on much better streets than this one. When that sheet fails again, it becomes pillowcases, and then dishcloths, and then rags for blacking the stove. And then, at the very end, it goes into a rag bag and is sold by the pound to a man with a wagon for something like 1/2 cent. Or it goes into a rag rug, braided in a spiral, so that the floor by your bed is made of every sheet and shirt this family has worn out since you married. Nothing in this house is thrown away. That is not thrift as a virtue. That is thrift as an accounting method. The machine sits under the window on its own iron treadle stand, and it is the single most valuable object you own that is not the stove. It cost you $25, and you did not have $25, and the company that sold it to you had built its entire business on the fact that nobody like you ever has $25. So you paid $1 down and $1 a week for 28 weeks, which comes to $28 altogether. And the $3 extra are the price of being poor. A man came to the door every Monday with a book, and he wrote the dollar in the book. And if you had missed enough Mondays, the company could take the machine back and keep everything you had already paid. Because until the last dollar, it was not sold to you. It was leased to you with an option. Half the houses on this street were furnished the same way. The parlor set, the clock, the encyclopedia nobody reads. The collector's book is a fixture of working life in this city, and the men who carry those books know your washing day and your husband's payday better than your own cousins do. You made the last payment 2 years ago, in a week when you did without meat, and you have never once regretted it, because that machine is the difference between mending being a thing you do and mending being a thing that buries you. A seam that takes you 20 minutes by hand takes 3 on the treadle. A dress that would have taken most of a week can be done in 2 evenings. What the machine gave you was not leisure. There is no leisure. What it gave you was the ability to absorb more work without drowning. You put the trousers under the foot, get the treadle going with the ball of your foot in that particular rocking rhythm that took a month to learn, and that you can now do while carrying on a conversation. And the needle goes down the seam like a small machine gun, and it is, honestly, one of the pleasures of your day. Here is something worth understanding about this exact decade, though, because it is changing under your feet while you sit there. Your mother made everything: shirts, drawers, dresses, the lot, cut from a length of cloth by eye and by a pattern kept in her head. You do not make everything. You cannot remember the last time you cut out a man's shirt from nothing, because a shirt at the dry goods store on Halstead can be had for about 50 cents to $1, ready-made in your husband's size, and the cotton in it alone would cost you 35 cents and 2 evenings. The arithmetic stopped favoring your labor sometime around when you were a girl, and it has not gone back. The great catalog houses are here in this city, and their books come to farmhouses in Nebraska and to flats in Chicago alike. Hundreds of pages, everything with a price beside it. Downtown on State Street, the department stores stand 8 and 9 stories of plate glass with whole floors of dresses on hangers in sizes, which is itself a new idea. Clothing that is made before anyone knows who will wear it. Your mother would have found that strange. You find it ordinary, and mostly out of reach, and you go and look at the windows anyway. So what you do now is not making. It is mending, altering, remaking, and letting out. It is the second half of a garment's life rather than the first, and it never ends, because ready-made clothing is cut to fit nobody in particular, and children insist on growing. The girl's dress comes out of the basket next, and this is the real work of the afternoon. She has come up 2 inches in the shoulder since autumn. You unpick the sleeve heads, take the tucks out of the bodice, and there is a strip of the original fabric across the chest that has never seen sun, still the color it was when it was bought. And the rest of the dress around it is 3 shades paler. You will have to set the good strip somewhere it can be a trim rather than a patch. When she is finally, absolutely done with this dress, it will be cut down for the younger girl. and after that the skirt will become a pinafore, and the sleeves will become sleeves for something else. If you laid out everything you own to wear, it would take up very little floor. 2 everyday dresses, one of them being worn right now, both wool or a wool and cotton mix, dark because dark does not show the city. 1 good dress, black, that does for church and for funerals and for the rent office and for any moment when you must be looked at by someone who might judge you. And it is 8 years old and has been remade twice. 3 aprons, because the apron is what stands between the dress and the day. And an apron washes, and a dress does not easily, not often. A shawl, a coat, heavy, second-hand. 1 pair of boots that are on your feet, and 1 pair that are past mending, and are kept anyway. 2 changes of underclothing, 1 hat, good, with a bird's wing on it that has been retrimmed with new ribbon twice to look like a different hat. That is the whole of it, and it is not poverty by the standards of this street. It is ordinary. A woman with 1 dress exists 3 doors down, and everybody knows it, and nobody says it. And a mile east of where you sit, on the streets running off Van Buren and Jefferson, the same needlework you are doing for nothing is being done for money in rooms with the windows shut. The garment trade in this city runs on the contracting system. A manufacturer cuts the cloth and then does not sew it. He hands the bundles to a contractor, and the contractor sews them in a room, sometimes a rented loft, very often the front 2 rooms of a flat, where the contractor and his family also live and eat and sleep. The people at the machines are paid by the piece, not by the hour, and not by the day. So many cents for finishing a coat, so many for a pair of trousers, and if the work is slow or the goods are late, there is simply no money that week, and no arrangement of any kind that says there should be. And a portion of it never even reaches a shop. It comes home. 2 doors up from you, there is a woman who takes in finishing. And 3 times a week, a boy brings a bundle of half-made trousers to her door, and she sits at her window, with her children on the floor exactly as you are sitting now, sewing on buttons and felling seams and pulling out basting threads, at rates that come out, by the time you have counted the hours honestly, to something in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 for a week, in which she has been at it every hour her eyes could stand. You have thought about asking for a bundle. You have thought about it more than once. The treadle keeps going, and you do not. There is a knock at 4 o'clock, and you know the weight of it before you have crossed the room. Not the neighbor's knock, which is 2 quick taps, and then the door already opening. Not the peddler's, which is louder and expects to be refused. This one is 3 even raps with a knuckle, and then a pause, and then patience, because the man on the other side has 11 more doors on this street, and he has learned that hurrying does not make anyone answer faster. You put the work down. You wipe your hands on the apron, even though your hands are clean, because it is a thing you do. And you open the door to the rent collector. He is not the landlord. It is worth saying that plainly, because the arrangement is easy to misunderstand from a distance. The man who owns this cottage, and the 2 behind it, does not live on this street, and has very likely never stood in this doorway. He owns property in several wards, and manages none of it himself. What he does is engage an agent, and the agent engages a collector, and the collector is the only person in that chain you will ever see. He carries a leather-covered book with a stub for every tenancy, and a stub of pencil, and a canvas bag with a strap that goes across his chest, and he is paid a small percentage of what he brings in. Which means that his interest and yours are not the same, but they are also not entirely opposed. He would rather you pay a little late than not at all. He would rather keep a tenant who pays $9 every month than empty the cottage and hunt for one who might pay 10 and might pay nothing. You have the money ready. It has been ready since Saturday night, in a tin on the shelf above the stove, and you have not touched it for anything, not for the coal and not for the grocer, because there is a hierarchy in this house, and rent sits at the top of it alone. $9. He counts it into his palm. Not because he doubts you, but because he counts everything. And then he writes in the book, and then he writes the same thing on a slip, and tears it along a perforated edge, and hands it across. The receipt. You take it, and you do not throw it away. It goes in a tin box with the others, 3 years of them now, and if there is ever a dispute about a month, that box is the whole of your case. There is no other record anywhere that you have paid this man anything at all. He asks after your husband. You say he is well. He says the weather has been fine for May, and that the fair has brought a great many people into the city, and he touches his hat, and he goes to the next door, and you hear the same 3 raps through the wall. $9 a month for 4 rooms in a wooden cottage on a lot west of Halstead. That is what this costs, and the number deserves a moment, because rent is the single largest fixed thing in the life of a household like yours, and almost nothing about how it is set has anything to do with the house itself. What you are renting is not really rooms. It is distance. Specifically, it is a short enough distance from the printing houses and the yards and the shops that a man can walk to work and walk home in the dark and still have the night to sleep. Every block closer to the works costs more. Every block further out costs less, and costs a nickel each way besides, twice a day, 6 days a week, which comes to more than the rent you saved. So families press inward until the pressing itself sets the price, and the price is not set by what a wooden cottage is worth, but by how many households want to be within walking distance of the same few streets. This is why the lots on your block hold what they hold. Understand what is actually behind you. This cottage faces the street, and it looks from the sidewalk like one small house on one small piece of ground. But go through the gate at the side, and there is a second building at the back of the lot, put up years after the first, 3 rooms and a shed, and a family in it. And there is a third structure beyond that which was built as a stable, and is not a stable now. Nobody planned this. It happened the way it happened everywhere on the west side, one owner at a time, deciding that a rear lot standing empty was money not being collected. Where the city has counted properly, in wards like this one, they find something in the range of 250 to 300 people living on a single acre of ground, and in the worst blocks, a good deal more than that, which is a figure that means very little until you stand at your own back fence and count the roofs. So, the $9 is not for the house. The house is thin boards and a stovepipe. The $9 is for being here rather than 4 miles out. Now, let the rest of it be laid out plainly, because you carry the whole of this in your head at every hour of every day. and you have never once written it down. Your husband is a compositor, and a compositor in a job printing house in this city in this year. When the work is steady, brings home something in the range of $16 to $18 for a week of 6 days. Call it 17. It is paid on Saturday in an envelope, and it does not come in the mail, and it does not go into a bank. It comes through the door in his coat pocket, and within an hour of its arriving, it has already been divided by you into portions that will not be recombined. Against that 17, the rent, $9 a month, which is a little over $2 a week set aside. Coal, which in May is small and in January is not, but averaged across the year runs near $1 a week and does not average. It simply arrives all at once when it is cold. Gas, if you had it, which you do not. Kerosene instead, a few cents. Insurance, which we will come to. Food is the largest moving part, and for 5 of you and a lodger eating at your table, careful buying, no waste, meat as a flavor rather than a portion on most days, you are spending somewhere between $6 and $7 a week, and you are spending it in pieces of 10 and 15 cents across 6 days. Added. Rent, coal, oil, insurance, food. You are at $11 or $12 before anyone has bought a pair of shoes. And against that, on the other side of the line, is the lodger's $4 a week, which is the reason the arithmetic closes at all, and which is also the reason a man you did not grow up with sleeps in your back room and eats at your table, and you cook for 6 instead of 5. What remains is perhaps $3 or $4 in a good week, and out of it comes everything that is not eaten or burned. Boots and boots for children are not a purchase you can postpone forever, because feet do not wait. Cloth, thread, a doctor, if it comes to that, at $1 or $2 the visit. The union dues, the installment on the machine you are sitting at. A funeral, if the year goes that way for anyone connected to you, because a funeral is not optional and it is not cheap. That is why the tins on the shelf are separate. Not sentiment. Method. If it all sits in one place, it is one sum, and it will be spent as one sum. And by Thursday, you will not know what you have taken from. So it is divided the hour it comes in, and each portion has a name, and the naming is what holds. There is one tin that surprises people who have never lived like this, and the collector for it comes on a different day. Every week, or in some houses every 2 weeks, a man from an industrial insurance company walks this street with a book very much like the rent collectors. He is collecting 5 cents a week for each person insured, sometimes 10. It is called penny insurance or burial insurance, and it does not pay out in the way that a proper life policy pays out. It is not a fortune, and it is not meant to be. What it buys is enough to cover a coffin, a hearse, a plot, and a stone, so that when a death happens in this house, and eventually one will, the family is not standing at the door of the parish or the county with nothing. Set aside for a moment whether the policies are good value, because as a matter of arithmetic, most of them are not. The company takes in more in nickels than it pays out, and it knows exactly how much more. What matters is that a household earning $17 a week cannot save $40 against a thing that might happen in a month, or might happen in 20 years. And this is the only mechanism anyone has offered you that turns $40 at once into 5 cents a week. So it is paid. It is paid before the shoes, and it is paid before anything you might have wanted. because the alternative is a pauper's burial, arranged by the county, in ground with no marker, and there is not a woman on this street who will let that happen while she has a nickel in a tin. It is not fear of death that funds this. It is the refusal of a certain kind of public shame, and companies were built on it, and the man with the book knows precisely why you never miss him. He comes on Wednesdays. He has been coming for 4 years. When the collector's steps have gone off the wooden walk, you take the tins down and open them, one at a time, and count. It is not that you have forgotten what is in them. You counted on Saturday, and you have not spent since. You count because counting is the only place in this arrangement where you have certain knowledge, and certain knowledge is worth the 2 minutes. Rent, empty now, and will begin filling again on Saturday. Cool, low, but May is forgiving. Insurance, correct to the nickel. Food which is not a tin but a knot in a handkerchief, and which has to reach Friday. And the last one, at the back, which is not for anything, which is where a coin goes when a week has been unusually kind. You lift it, and you already know before it is open, from the sound, that there is very little in it. You put them back in a row, and you go and see about the fire. The afternoon has gone long and yellow by now, and the 2 younger ones have found the one subject they will not let go of. They want to know about the fair. Everyone wants to know about the fair. It opened the 1st of May, out at Jackson Park on the lake, 6 miles south and east of your door, and since then it has been impossible to walk to the corner without hearing about it. The grocer has a lithograph of the Great Basin tacked behind his ledger shelf. The boy who brings the ice has been twice already, and describes the same 3 things each time, in the same order, with total conviction, as though you had not heard it the day before. Your older child came home from school in April, with a paper flag, and a fact about the size of the dome. Your youngest wants to know if the wheel is bigger than a house. That is the question, exactly as put, and it is a reasonable question, and you do not have an answer that you trust. So here is the arithmetic, done quietly, the way you do all of it. Admission is 50 cents. Children under 12 are half, 25 cents. You have 3 children, 2 of them under 12, and 1 of them not. And there is yourself. And if your husband came, it would be another 50. Call it $2.25 for the family at the gate, before a single thing is bought inside. And there is no honest world in which nothing is bought inside. Then there is getting there. The Illinois Central runs excursion trains down from the loop for a fare each way, or the cable line, and a transfer, and a walk. 5 people moving 6 miles and back is not free in any version of the trip, and call that another 60 or 70 cents if you are careful, and more if you are not. Then there is the day itself. A day at the fair is 10 hours on your feet, and 5 people cannot walk 10 hours on a sandwich carried in a cloth. Something will be bought. Something is always bought when children are tired, and there is a man selling it in front of them. So the true figure, the honest one, the one you would put in a tin if you were putting it anywhere, is somewhere near $3.50. Possibly 4. Your husband earns $15 in a good week. Rent is $9 a month. You know the rest of it by heart because you have just counted it. $3.50 is not impossible. That is what makes it difficult. If it were impossible, you could simply say so, and the subject would close. It is not impossible. It is a week of coal in winter. It is a pair of shoes with something left over. It is roughly what stands between an ordinary march and a frightening one. That is the shape of the decision. And the children cannot see any part of it, and you would not show it to them if you could. Now, about what is actually out there, because it deserves saying plainly. It is called the World's Columbian Exposition, 400 years after Columbus, 1 year late, and it is the largest thing any American city has ever built and taken down again on purpose. Something over 600 acres of drained lakefront swamp turned into courts and basins and lagoons. 14 principal buildings, all of them white, all of them enormous, and all of them fake in a specific and interesting way. They are not stone. They are wood and steel frames sprayed with a mixture of plaster and cement and hemp fiber, which the papers call staff, and which was chosen because it can be molded into anything and put up fast and painted white and will hold its shape for a season. That is the whole trick of the White City. It is a stage set at the scale of a district, built to stand for 6 months and then come down. The Manufactures and Liberal Arts building alone covers something over 30 acres under one roof, and the reported figure, which people repeat constantly and which is roughly true, is that it could hold the entire standing army of the United States inside it with room to march. There is a moving sidewalk on the pier. There is a building given over entirely to electricity, and it is lit at night. And that is the part that comes up in every account without exception. Because the lighting is the thing. Not the buildings, not the statuary, not the exhibits from 40 nations. The lighting. There are thousands of incandescent lamps outlining the cornices and the domes and ringing the basin, and there are searchlights on the roofs. And at dusk they are switched on all at once, and the whole white district comes up out of the dark at the same instant. Consider what that means to a person standing there in 1893. You have an oil lamp on the table. Your street has gas standards at the corners, lit one at a time in the evening by a man with a pole, and between them the walk is dark enough that you count the steps. Everyone you know lives after sundown inside a circle of light about 8 feet across and moves from one such circle to the next. And that has been true of every human being who has ever lived up to about 15 years ago. Electric light was not new in 1893. It had been in the downtown streets and in some of the big stores for over a decade. But it had never been done at that scale, all at once, as a spectacle, in front of people who had come specifically to look at it. People wept. That is in the accounts, over and over, and it is not sentimentality. They wept because the night went away. You know all this, and you have not seen any of it. You know it the way most of the city's women knew it, which is second-hand and thoroughly. The newspapers are full of it, and the papers reach you even when you do not buy them, because your husband brings one home from the shop 3 or 4 nights a week, sometimes yesterday's, sometimes a page of it used as wrapping. There are engravings. There are descriptions written by men paid to be astonished. Your neighbor's brother-in-law has been and told it at length across the fence. Someone on the block has a stereoscope and a set of views, and the children have been permitted to look one at a time, holding it steady, and have come back with reports. So the fair is entirely present in your life and entirely outside it, and that is a thing worth sitting with, because it describes more than the fair. There is another Chicago about 4 miles east of where you are standing, and it is a streetcar ride, and you go into it perhaps a few times a year. State Street has the great stores now, and they are not shops in the way the corner grocer is a shop. They are buildings of many floors with departments in them, plate glass at the street, with the goods arranged behind it under light, and you may walk in without buying, and no one will stop you or ask your business. That was new within living memory, and it changed something. A woman of no particular means could spend an afternoon downtown among goods she had no intention of purchasing, and that was understood to be an acceptable way to spend an afternoon. And there were tea rooms and retiring rooms provided so that she could stay longer. Above the streets, there are buildings 10 and 12 and 16 stories tall, put up on steel frames since the fire, with elevators in them, and people have started calling them skyscrapers, and mostly mean it as a compliment. There is elevated railway running on iron above the street, and more of it going up all the time, some of it built specifically to carry people out to the fairgrounds. You have stood on State Street with a basket. You have looked in the windows. You have gone home on the cable car and cooked supper. There is one more thing within walking distance, and it is closer than any of it. Over on Halsted, in an old brick house that used to belong to a man named Hull, 2 women named Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr have been running something since 1889 that people call a settlement. The idea, imported from London, is that educated people of means should simply move into a working district and live there, permanently, as neighbours, and see what the neighbourhood asks of them. What this neighbourhood asked for, immediately and overwhelmingly, was somewhere to put the children. So there is a kindergarten. There is a day nursery, which takes infants and small children by the day for a few cents, and which exists because women on your street take in piecework and go out to scrub offices, and cannot do either with a 2-year-old on the floor. There is a public bath, because the city would not build one. So they built one, and then embarrassed the city into building more. There are clubs. There are classes in the evenings, in English, in cooking, in sewing, in bookbinding of all things, and lectures that anyone may attend, and a reading room, and a coffee house, and a gymnasium. And it is free, or nearly, and no one asks what church you belong to before you are let in, which is not true of every charity in this city, and the women here know exactly which ones. You have been inside. Most women on these blocks have been inside at some point, for a club meeting or a bath, or to leave a child. Some go constantly, and some have gone once, and found it not for them. And both of those are ordinary. There is a certain amount of talk about the ladies up there, and what they think they are doing, and the talk is affectionate about half the time. But the fact of it is that a woman on this street in 1893 has somewhere to go in the evening that is warm and lit and costs nothing. And that is not a small fact. The youngest is still waiting for the answer about the wheel. You tell her that it is taller than the church steeple, which is true, and that it carries more people at once than live on this whole street, which is also true, and she considers this and accepts it with the seriousness of someone filing away a fact for later use. Then the older one asks whether you are going, and asks it directly, the way children ask the one question you are hoping to walk around. And you say that you will see, and that it will depend on the summer, and that the fair is open until October, which is all true, and none of it is an answer. And the older one is old enough to know that. The light goes long and orange across the yard, and then it goes grey, and the wooden sidewalk out front begins to sound different, because the men are coming home along it. You know the sound. Boots on plank. Not one pair, but a scattering of them. 10 minutes apart and then 2 minutes apart. The whole street filling up again from the outside in. Somebody's dog starts. Somebody 2 doors down calls a child in from a game, and the child does not come, and is called again with a different note in the voice, and comes. Your husband arrives a little after 7. The shop keeps him past 6 most nights, and later when there is a rush job, and the walk from the printing house is better than half an hour if he does not take the horse car, which he mostly does not, because 5 cents is 5 cents, and the walk is not so bad in April. In January, it is a different arithmetic, and he takes the car, and you do not argue about it. He comes in with the dinner pail under his arm, and the pail is empty, which is the first thing you check without meaning to, and he sets it on the shelf by the door where it lives. Then he goes straight to the basin. This is the part of the evening that does not vary. Before he sits, before he speaks to the children beyond a word, he washes his hands and his forearms up past the wrist, and he does it thoroughly and takes his time about it, and the water in the basin goes grey. He is a compositor. He sets type by hand, standing at a case, picking individual letters out of their compartments and building them into lines in a composing stick held in his left hand. He does this for 10 hours. The type is metal, and the metal is mostly lead with some antimony and tin in it, and it leaves a fine grey dust on everything it touches, and it is on his hands all day. Every printer's wife in this city knows about washing before eating. It is not a mystery, and it is not a secret. The trade papers say it. The union says it. The older men in the shop tell the apprentices on their first week. And the rule in this house is that nobody sits down to a table with the day still on their hands. He follows it because he was told to follow it at 19 by a man who had been setting type since before the fire, and he has never once needed reminding. He rolls his sleeves down. He asks after the day. You give him the short version, which is the wash and the rent collector and the price of coffee, and he gives you his, which is that the shop took a long job from a mail order house, and there will be overtime through the month. Overtime is good, and overtime is also more hours standing. You put supper on. There is boiled beef from the noon dinner, cut up with potatoes and onion, and a little of the broth, and bread, and what is left of the butter, and coffee. The lodger comes through from the back room when he hears the plates, because that is the arrangement, and he sits at the end of the table nearest the door. He is a machinist's helper, unmarried, in his 20s, from a town in Michigan you have never seen and cannot picture. He pays $4 a week for the back room and his board, and he is neat and quiet and does not drink at home. He talks to your husband about the shops and about baseball, and almost never to you beyond thanking you for the plate. which suits both of you fine. The children eat first, or rather they have already eaten, mostly, and are now at the table anyway with the ends of theirs, because they want to be where the noise is. The youngest sits half on the bench and half on your lap. The older girl has her elbows exactly where she has been told not to put them. The table is not big enough for 5.5 people, and so the arrangement is that the two smallest are in and out, and you eat standing at the stove for the first part of it, and sit down properly when there is room. You do not think of this as anything. It is simply how the table works. Your husband and the lodger get to the strike before the plates are half cleared, because in Chicago, in the spring of 1893, it takes about 4 minutes at any table to get to the strike. Here is the thing worth slowing down for, because it sits underneath your household's whole finances like a flaw you cannot see. Your husband carries a union card. He belongs to the Typographical Union, which is one of the oldest and best organized trades in the country. And this is not a small thing to belong to. The union means a scale of wages that the shop is expected to meet. It means an apprenticeship that took him years and that cannot be shortcut by a boy hired cheap off the street. It means that if he is out of work, he can go to the union office, and there is a list, and his name goes on it in order, and men are sent to shops in that order, rather than by whoever begs loudest at the door. It also means dues, paid monthly, out of your tins on the shelf. And it means that when the trade decides to fight over something, your household is in the fight, whether or not you are asked. The great question of the age in this city is hours. Not only wages, hours. There has been a movement for the 8-hour day going on since before you were married, in waves, rising and falling and rising again. And Chicago has been the center of it more than any other city in America. Men in this neighborhood remember the mass meetings of the 80s the way other people remember weather. The printers have had their own version of the argument, shop by shop, over the 9-hour day and the 10, and over what happens to a man's pay when his hours come down. The arithmetic is what makes it hard, and the arithmetic lands on your shelf, not his. A strike in the printing trade would mean no wages coming in on Saturday. The union keeps a benefit fund and pays out to men on strike, but it pays out something like $5 a week, where the wage was $18, and $5 a week does not pay rent of $11 a month, and coal, and the grocer's ledger, and the burial insurance, and feed 4 people. The lodger's $4 keeps coming, which is one reason the back room is rented at all. Beyond that, there is the grocer, who will carry a family further in a strike than in ordinary times, because he knows the whole street is in it together. And a grocer who cuts off a striking street has no street left afterward. You have not been through a printer's strike in this house. You have been through 6 weeks of short time in the winter after the panic talk started, and you know exactly what 6 weeks feels like in the tins, and you can extrapolate. So when your husband and the lodger argue about hours over the beef, you listen with more attention than either of them realizes, and you do not say much, and what you are actually doing is running the numbers against the shelf. The lodger is hot for it. He is 24 and has nobody depending on him, and he can afford to be. Your husband is careful about it, which is not the same as being against it. He was raised in the trade, and he will vote with the shop when the shop votes. But he is 33, and there are 3 children asleep in the next room, and he does the same arithmetic you do from the other side of it. The plates come off the table. The lodger says good night and goes back through, and you hear his door. Then the evening becomes the good part, which is short. You light the lamp properly, the good one with the clean chimney, and set it in the middle of the cleared table, and the room shrinks around it the way a room does. Kerosene at about 10 cents a gallon, and a gallon lasts the better part of 2 weeks if you are sensible about it, and you are sensible about it. The children move in toward the light without being told, the way anything alive does. The older girl has a slate and a lesson. She works at it with her tongue between her teeth. Your husband reads the paper. He reads it aloud, some of it, because that is what the paper is for in this house. It is a 2-cent daily, bought at the corner, and by the time it reaches this table, it has usually been read once already at the shop, and folded into his coat. He reads out the fair news, because everyone reads out the fair news. He reads out a piece about the wheel, and the youngest sits straight up. He reads out the price of wheat, because the price of wheat is somehow always in there. He reads out an item about the waterworks, and you make a face at it. And this is very nearly the whole of how the world reaches you. Understand what your sources actually are. There is the paper, second-hand, and read aloud. There is the talk over the fence, which is faster than the paper and about as reliable. There is the priest or the minister on Sunday. There is what the grocer says, and the grocer talks to 40 families a day, and is therefore the single best informed person on this street. There are the letters from your sister in Milwaukee, 3 or 4 a year, and the postal card that came at Christmas. There is what the older girl brings home from school, which is increasingly not nothing, and there is the printed matter that comes into the house sideways. The mail order catalogue, thick as a brick, which you read the way other people read a novel. The almanac, the story paper, the neighbor passes over the fence when she is finished with it. A cookbook you were given at your wedding, and have added to in pencil in the margins. You read. You read well and quickly, and more than anyone in this house, except possibly your husband, and there is nothing unusual in that. But you read in fragments, at the edges of the day, standing up with a child on your hip, and the only hour when reading is the whole of what you are doing is this one, right now, with the lamp between you and the slate scratching across the table. The clock says 9:30. The youngest has gone heavy against your arm and has not noticed. You carry him to bed first, because he will not walk, and there is no sense pretending otherwise. The back bedroom is cold in the way rooms get cold when the stove has been let down. And you lay him on the near side of the bed and work his shoes off without waking him, one and then the other, and set them under the frame where he will find them. His stockings you leave. It is not a night for principles about stockings. The middle one goes next, protesting the way a child protests when the protest is already half a dream. The older girl finishes her sums because she has decided to finish them, and you let her, and she carries the slate to bed with her the way another child might carry a doll. Then the kitchen, and the last of it. There is a sequence to the end of a day, and you have never once written it down, and you could not forget it if you tried. It goes like this. The stove first, because everything else depends on the stove. You open the door and look at what is left, and what is left is a bed of coals gone dull orange at the edges. You lay on a scoop of coal, not much, enough, and you close down the drafts until the fire is only barely a fire. This is called banking, and the point of it is that at 4:30 tomorrow morning there will be a live ember under the ash instead of a cold black box that needs kindling and paper, and 20 minutes you do not have. A banked fire is an hour of tomorrow, bought tonight. Everyone on this street knows how to do it, and nobody was ever taught it in a schoolroom. Then the reservoir on the side of the range, filled from the pail, so that there is warm water in the morning without waiting on it. Then the dinner pail. You do this at night, always, because at 5 in the morning your hands know what to do, but your judgment is not fully awake, and you will forget something. Bread cut and wrapped in a cloth. Cold meat, if there is cold meat, and tonight there is a little. A boiled egg. Something for the sweetness of it. A bit of cake, or a spoon of preserves in a screw jar. The coffee goes in the tin flask and gets its cork. You latch the pail and set it on the shelf by the door where it cannot be missed, and beside it his cap. Then the clothes. His over the chair back, in the order he will want them. The children's on the trunk. Yours last, and you look at your dress the way you look at every garment in this house, which is to say you check the cuffs and the placket and decide it will do one more day. Then the yard. You take the lamp because the privy is at the back of the lot, and the path is not level. It is cold enough that your breath shows. The stars over Chicago are not much to speak of. Not on the west side, not with the smoke, but there are a few of them. And there is a moon somewhere behind the roof line of the house next door. You can hear, from the north, the long, low sound of a train pulling out of a yard, and under it the sound this whole city makes at night, which is not silence, but a kind of low, continuous machinery, freight and mill and pump, 4 miles of it in every direction, going all night, whether anyone is awake to hear it or not. Somewhere over toward the avenue, a horse-car bell rings twice. Late run. There is a man in this neighborhood who drives that line and is not home yet. You come back up the path, and the wooden sidewalk out front creaks under someone, a heavy step, unhurried, going east. You do not look. You know most of the steps on this block by now, the way you know the voices through a wall. Inside, you set the lamp down and turn the bolt. The kitchen at this hour is the only version of this room you ever have to yourself. The basin is emptied. The table is cleared and wiped, and the slate has gone to bed with its owner. The tins are on the shelf in their row. The tub is in the shed. The lines in the yard are empty. The bread for tomorrow is set and covered with a cloth, and it will rise slowly in the cool and be ready when you are. Everything in this room has been put into the position from which tomorrow can begin. That is the whole of it. That is the work. Now hold still for a moment, here at the end, and let us be plain about what you have done today, because nobody else is going to be. You woke in the dark and made fire. You carried water, by the pail, from a tap in a yard, more times than you counted, because counting it would have made it heavier. You washed the clothing of 6 people by hand in stages, boiled it, blued it, wrung it, hung it, judged the air for soot before you hung the white things, and brought it in. You bought food on credit, and kept the running total in your head accurately enough to know within a few cents what Saturday would leave you. You cooked twice. You fed a husband, 3 children, and a lodger on a schedule that accommodated 3 different sets of hours. You kept a stove at usable temperature all day by hand, by eye, without a thermometer, and did not burn the bread. You mended and remade clothing so that it would last past the point where it should have. You paid a rent collector and a burial insurance collector and got receipts for both. You settled a dispute over a ball in the street. You got one child to school and back, and sat with her over her sums at 9 at night. And you did all of it with a 2-year-old within arm's reach the entire time. Now consider how that appears in the record. Your husband's wages are written down. They are entered in a book at the printing house, and they appear in the wage surveys the state gathers. And 100 years from now, somebody can look up what a compositor in Chicago earned in the spring of 1893 and find it to the dollar. The rent is written down in the collector's book and yours. The grocer's ledger has your name in it. The insurance man has a card with a column of neat check marks. Every dollar that moved through this household today was recorded by somebody. The labor that made those dollars survive contact with a family of 6 is recorded nowhere at all. The census taker who comes to this door will ask your husband's occupation and write compositor. He will ask yours and write in the same steady hand, keeping house, and move on to the next question. 2 words. There is no box on the form for the arithmetic, or the fire management, or the credit negotiation, or the fact that a woman who buys coal by the bucket instead of by the ton is paying a penalty for poverty and knows the exact size of the penalty and has arranged the week around minimizing it. There is no box for the judgment that keeps typhoid out of a house on a street where the water is not to be trusted. Keeping house. 2 words, and the 2 words are not wrong exactly. They are simply not large enough to hold what actually happened here today. And here is the part that matters most, and the part it would be easy to soften. Your skill is real. It is not a consolation prize, and it is not a sentimental idea about the dignity of humble work. It is genuine, technical, hard-won competence, and if it stopped, this household would come apart inside of a week. You are the reason a wage that should not quite stretch does stretch. Everyone here is warm and fed and clothed, and in school on money that, on paper, is not sufficient for those outcomes. And the difference between the paper and the reality is you. And none of it belongs to you. Not legally, not economically, not in any way that could be carried out the door. You have no wage of your own. You have no claim on the wage that comes in. The lease is not in your name. The insurance is on the lives of others. The skill you have spent 11 years perfecting is not a trade you could take into a market, because the market does not name it, and the thing that makes your household stable is precisely the thing that would leave you with nothing if the household ended. That is not a flaw in your particular marriage. It is not a failure of your husband, who is a decent enough man carrying his own weight in a trade that will wear his lungs before it is finished with him. It is the shape of the arrangement itself, and it was arranged before either of you was born. Both of those things are true at once. You are extraordinarily good at this, and the structure you are good inside of would not miss a beat if you vanished from its accounts, because you were never in them. Some of that will change, eventually. Not for you. The lamp is low now. You reach and turn the wick down further, until the flame is a small blue seed in the glass, and then you take it up and carry it across the kitchen. Behind you, the range ticks once as the iron cools, the way it does, settling. Under the ash, there is a red thread of coal that will still be there in 7 hours. The dinner pail sits on the shelf with the cap beside it. The bread rises in the dark under its cloth. You turn the lamp out